So I left it to you guys to pick this evening's talk, the topic, and the top question that was asked was, why do we shop? I thought this is a fascinating question. Why are we addicted to online shopping? Specifically, why do we go to Amazon, Shopee, Lazada? And it's a great question because it actually takes us into a dive into neuroscience and how our brain has actually evolved. I've been reading into the work of a Dr. Terry Wu, he's a brilliant neuroscientist. And as much as I could think that we are thinking minds, thinking brains that feel, that we're very rational, in fact, if you look at the evolution of the brain, we are actually feeling brains that think. Because your brain, your mind essentially is divided into, your brain's divided into two parts, two systems. You've got your limbic system, which is actually that part of your brain in the center part that is in charge of your emotions, how you feel. And the joy, the sadness, the anxiety, the stress, that comes from the limbic part of your brain. And then at the front, you have the frontal cortex, which is essentially the logical thinking part of your brain. And of course, that's how we make decisions, how we reason. And how your mind should work is that the limbic system, that one part, that feeling part, should interact with the frontal cortex and in a way that hopefully is efficient, where we are both feeling and thinking. However, it doesn't really work like that. And if you look at the evolution of the brain, your limbic system actually evolved before the frontal cortex. It was actually there first. We were always, firstly, a feeling brain, then a thinking brain. But especially in contexts where you feel high emotions, like for example, when you feel stress, that part of your brain, that limbic part of your brain can easily overpower the frontal cortex. And if you're trying to think about why we are sort of addicted to shopping, especially recently, the pandemic, a great example, is if you look at the example of people going into, let's say, a grocery store, and as we've seen it with the pandemic, I mentioned it in a few of my videos, we're piling up, stockpiling toilet paper. And if you think about it, it makes no logical sense. Those of us that have done it, and don't be guilty and don't be ashamed, those of us that actually stockpiled, toilet paper, we didn't actually need it that much. Yet many people did that. And this is a great highlight of how your limbic system works. The reason why we shop, at least in that context, is because, again, we are stressed. The pandemic is, of course, a very scary thing, especially at its very onset. And as part of the coping mechanism, part of how our brain works, this stress is overpowering, and we buy things emotionally in that context to gain a sense of control, to gain a sense of control in the chaos of what was happening, specifically with the pandemic itself and the onset of it. But not just that, not just stress. We do the same things as well when we want a sense of instant gratification, for example, a sense of reward. We shop hopefully to make ourselves feel better, to feel good, to feel control, to feel joy. And the reason why we shop, of course, is very emotional. And perhaps this is nothing new to you. You might feel that, yes, I know I shop because I like to enjoy. It makes me feel good when I'm stressed, when I'm unhappy, when I just want to cheer myself up and have some retail therapy. Now, what's so interesting though is that as we know how our brains actually work, then we look at society, and what we realize very quickly is that our brains have not actually evolved to deal with the sort of shopping context of today. Well, let me start by saying this. If you consider online shopping, for example, this is an instance in society where we can essentially get anything we want at any time. Online shopping is truly 24/7. There is no barriers towards us getting what we want. The way that we've evolved is actually to deal with consumption in a very physical way. If we wanted something, at least in the past, we'd have to go somewhere to get it. We couldn't actually do what we do now, which is grab our phone and all of a sudden we get what we want. We had to go through this process, this journey to get what we want. But in the context of today, that is entirely gone. And our minds, our brains, they've not actually evolved to deal with this context. So instantly, at any moment, we can easily indulge in shopping, and oftentimes it becomes this spiraling abyss where we start to just keep buying and consuming and consuming. And this is, again, the reason our brain is not evolved with the current context. But also beyond that, in the context of actually spending. Nowadays, of course, we know that currency is no longer just physical cash. Literally, we've got cards, we've got payment apps, we've got PayPal, and all these online digital wallets. When we're actually spending money, we are not even truly aware that money has actually disappeared. We don't actually feel that physical disappearance of money. something that, of course, that we are not used to. Again, in the past, when we actually consume, we actually feel the expenditure, the resources. We have to physically give something away for it. Pretty much for the hundreds of years in our society, perhaps even going back thousands of years, but that's no longer the case today. And perhaps what is more devious, whether it's done advertently or inadvertently, is the fact that these companies, Amazon for example, they've actually more or less diminished the frontal cortex part of our brains. Because again, decision making is an important part of consumption, of shopping, and we should take time to think. But when you go on Amazon or you go on Shopee and you're looking for the thing that you want, and instantly you see results of course, the platform recommending you what to get and telling you that this is what everyone else is getting, and these are the reviews and these are the top choices. And in that context, what is actually happening is that the decision making is actually being done for us by these platforms. Again, our brains have not been designed to deal with this very novel context where essentially in this current day and age, we don't have to think anymore. We should just feel, and we should just consume based on our whims. And that's exactly what is happening in the current age, and why so many people are addicted to online shopping, and why when you're on this, late night search, and you're looking for one thing, you end up getting more and more and more, and before you know it, you realize you spent so much and it's all gone, the money's gone. And the reason why is because of how our brains are, but also the fact that they've not been evolved to deal with the current context of how shopping actually happens. And so this is very fascinating when you really think about it, because it shows you that the power is more and more in the hands of course, the businesses, the companies, and ultimately in technology. Technology has overpowered biology in significant ways, at least in this context. So what can we do about it? Well, from what I said, I think three things. The first thing being this: we have to realize that oftentimes we shop as a means to actually fulfill the emotional part of our brain, the limbic system. But again, whether objectively it actually does so is another thing. We have to also have a sense of rationality. For example, pandemic, we're very stressed, so we're buying copious amounts of toilet paper, but do you actually need it? That's the question. And it turns out, no, actually. I have a story full of toilet paper, perhaps if it's there. Or, beyond that, for example, you are very stressed and you feel like you need to buy things to make yourself happy. Does that actually solve the stresses in your life? And what we tend to realize when you actually exercise that frontal cortex, that logical part of your brain, that rationality, is that actually shopping does not carry the solution to the emotional problems we're going through. There might be healthier ways of actually doing that, besides shopping. And the second thing is to realize that we live in an age where the barriers are dissipating very, very significantly throughout all industries and all areas of human activities. Consumption evolved. In the past, we had to actually go through a barrier to get something, and today it's all instantly that you can get whatever you want. So one way to overcome this is to create a barrier for yourself. Realize that it's too easy to get anything you want, and perhaps you need to set a barrier for yourself so that you don't go, full acceleration, non-stop, and eventually waste all your money and expend everything. It's important to have a sense of control. In this area, I think you can read into the area of actually behavioral economics, which is very fascinating because it talks about how, again, emotionally we behave very differently from how we should behave, which is rationally, actually. And finally, in terms of, I suppose, the overall thing of realizing this is, we are actually gaining so much convenience today through technology, but at the same time, we're actually exchanging autonomy. And it is an invitation. No one is trying to rob your autonomy. No one's trying to rob your decision-making. You're allowing that to happen, actually, in exchange for convenience. So rather than just, pick, let's say, things that people recommend to you, the technology platforms recommend to you, exercise some autonomy. Think for yourself. Actually be your own person. It's easier to just let people decide for you in almost every area of life, whether it is shopping or whatever. But it is important that you also gain that sense of independence, especially in a time and an age where independence is increasingly being jeopardized and also challenged by the way that society has evolved. And so that's why we are addicted to online shopping and how we can solve. Hey everyone, just a quick announcement and update from me. I'll be taking a break from the evening chats for the rest of 2021. So The video you just saw will be the last one that I'll be posting this year. I'll be back again next year in 2022. I want to take this moment to just say thank you so much. When I first started the sharing in May, I had no idea we'd be able to build this amazing community of knowledge. It truly has been quite incredible, quite awe-inspiring for me, and really a great joy to meet many of you, to interact with many of you, and most importantly to engage in these thoughtful, thought-provoking discussions that we've had. It truly has been very motivating to me and it's brought a lot of passion to my life. I'd like to sincerely thank you. With that said, on time back, if you're feeling that you need your dose of all these intellectual discussions, feel free to visit Empirical Asia. It's actually where I get most of my inspirations for the topics I do. Of course, where I also gain most of my knowledge as well. But other than that, I'd like to say thank you so much for supporting me on this journey, for tuning in, for being part of what we're doing here. So cheers for that, and from the bottom of my heart, Happy New Year.